The Stelter Company combined forces with the nationally renowned research firm Stelter and Company to provide groundbreaking research into who names charities in their wills, when, and why. Our discovery, the audience most gift planners target today may represent only the tip of the iceberg. Our findings call into question common practices among gift planning professionals in how they identify prospects, cultivate their donors, and communicate with them on an ongoing basis. In this presentation, we will provide a summary of the results of this enlightening research and speak to the ways in which nonprofits may need to rethink conventional wisdom and current practices. It is my great pleasure to introduce Ann Selzer.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I've been working with Stelter and Company for the past year, really trying to unlock the thinking inside the reasoning and the logic that drive people to decide or not decide to make a planned gift in their will. And this research is groundbreaking, and I want to get right to the findings for you. Our objectives in conducting the survey were, first of all, to scientifically document the world of plan givers. That is, we wanted to apply stringent rules of sampling and be sure that we could, when we were done, represent the universe of the United States in terms of planned giving. We wanted to confirm current strategies that help nonprofits succeed in identifying and cultivating planned givers, and we wanted to develop data-driven tactics that would help make nonprofits more successful in their marketing efforts. And just by way of a quick review of our methodology, we talked to adults age 40 and over throughout the United States. Our sample size was 901, and we divided that into two segments. We did a straight random sample of 601 and took a look at what we were getting there and decided to do an oversample just of planned givers and prospects. We did an additional 300 interviews so that we had a nice, rich database of that kind of person so we could profile them for you. We, of course, weighted the data so it looks like a cross-section of adults age 40 and over. That gives us a margin of error plus or minus 3.3 percentage points. We did this earlier this year, and we did it by telephone. So here's a quick overview to kind of guide you and let you know where we're headed with what we learned. First, we now know how many plan givers there are in the US among adults age 40 and over, and we know how many prospects are inclined to give. And that really is helpful for nonprofits in turning to how they're going to cultivate and expand their base of donors. First of all, we know that 7% of US residents age 40 and over say they have a will and they currently mention a nonprofit in their will. There's another 5% who have a will in place and they plan to add a nonprofit in the future. We ask them how likely that is. They say they will definitely or probably add a nonprofit at some point in the future. An additional 5% don't have a will yet, but again, they say they will definitely or probably add a nonprofit at the time that they're ready to put a will together. And that time frame for putting that will together is really relatively soon. 73% of that group said their expectation is that will be in place within the next 5 years. Now, in terms of other data to compare this to, what's out there and what's bantered around in the industry is an IRS computation based on decedents and who pay estate tax. And my understanding is you need to have an estate of $2 million in order to pay estate tax. So that's really 3% of annual deaths are based on this computation. Of these estates, 18% include a charitable contribution. So that's 18% of the 3%. It's a very small percentage of decedents. The other number that is often cited is an 8% number, and that comes from Giving USA. And what they say, and here's a direct quote, is bequest giving is 7.6% of total estimated giving for 2007, which is really not the same thing we're talking about at all. What they're talking about is based on dollars. Of the dollars that are given, 7.6% of those dollars come from bequests. It's not based on people. Not 7.6% of people intend to make a bequest. So what we're doing is different from what's been done, even if our numbers look a little bit similar that way. And we certainly have never had a good prospect number. So who are these current and future givers? We've got some demographic details, so these are slides full of a few more numbers than we often like to give, showing who are current givers, who are the prospects who already have wills, and who are the prospects who do not yet have wills. And we've separated those for reasons that you're going to understand pretty much, because they differ substantially from the other two groups. And they are the secret givers, who are the name of this campaign. They're secret because nobody is really thinking about them in terms of their potential to become planned givers. So one of the ways in which that group differs is in the amount of income they report for their households. And if you look at this chart, the column to your left shows you the general population and how they break out in terms of household income. And then in red, we've highlighted where these three groups differ from the general population. So you'll see that both plan givers and prospects with wills include more people in that highest income bracket, whereas prospects without wills in place include more people who are in a lower income bracket. That is, a full 70% have incomes under $100,000 a year, and that makes them different from the prospects with a will and from current plan givers who tend to have higher incomes. Education, we know that nonprofits often target people with the highest degree of education, and you can see why. They're more likely to report having a college degree or higher. Our prospects without a will, it's not that they're a majority, but they're strongly more likely to say that they have only so much as a high school education. So that as a group, they tend to have lower education. They also tend to be the youngest. 65% of this group are under age 55. And as you can see, that's almost twice the proportion of these other two groups. They are also more likely slightly to be single and slightly more likely to have children under the age of 18 living at home with them. So you can see their demographics make them very different from the current plan givers or even the good prospects who already have a will in place. And what that makes clear is that as you are recruiting and talking to and soliciting these younger potential donors, you really have to think about them in a different way and solicit them differently based on their age. That is the strongest identifying trait, is that age group. And many nonprofits basically don't start talking to potential donors until they hit age 55. We think, based on these data, that that thinking is outdated, that things have changed, and I'm going to show you a little bit why we think that. One of the things that was very strong in our data is how people are resistant to the idea of putting nonprofits in the will and how that differs by age. So among the group that is the youngest in our sample, those aged 40 to 49, this is 45% saying they have a will, but they are not inclined at this point or in the future to include a nonprofit in their will. 45% are resistant to the idea of becoming a planned giver. Well, that's a higher number among those in their 50s, about the same those in their 60s, and it grows to 72% among those in their 70s. That is, by the time they reach that age, if they don't already have a nonprofit in their will, 72% are unlikely to add them. And that's different from those who are in their 40s. They're much more likely, there's much more potential for them. They're less resistant to the idea. One of the things that is part of all of this is that wills are happening at a younger age. People are putting wills in place at a younger age. So this is among all those in our sample, age 40 and over, who have a will. How old were you when you put your will in place? And as you can see, 41% did it before they reached the age of 40. Another 25% before they reached the age of 50. And so really people at a younger stage of life are getting their wills together, and that's not happening sort of as they are late in life when they feel like that might be a more urgent thing to have happen. And if you break that out by age, what you see is that this is the proportion of people who say they put their will in place before they reach the age of 40. And that's 3 out of 4 who are in their 40s right now. About half of those who are in their 50s, about a third of those who are in their 60s, and you can see that putting a will together when they were young was not very common among those who are now in their 70s. And so you can really see here that there's a generational change in when people are putting wills together. One of the very important things, and has dramatic consequences for how you talk to prospects, is that once a nonprofit is in a will, it tends to stick. That means there's very little risk in cultivating givers who are at a younger age for fear that they might you might have wasted your time, that they would have dropped out of the will, lost interest in you. It really happens very rarely. And really, we think the risk is waiting too long. Waiting for them to be ready, you think, to have that will in final form. You might be too late by that time. That will may already be filled up with worthy nonprofits, and there might be no place for your nonprofit to be added in. And older Americans, as we just said, are more resistant to the ideas of planned gifts if they haven't already made them by the time they're in their 70s. So here's showing that data on the stickiness of gifts once they are in a will. This is among those who currently have a nonprofit in their will. We asked them, have you ever had a nonprofit in your will, and then taken them out? 7% said yes. They have. 93% said no. But really, we should ask that among anybody who has a will, because potentially, even though they don't have a nonprofit in their will now, maybe they had one before and they elected to take them out. And that ends up to be less than 1%. So really, there's very little risk of getting your nonprofit in someone's will at a younger age. One of the other things that makes us sort of pull all of these data together into the idea of a secret giver is that givers really do not want to tell nonprofits about their planned gifts. And that is a challenge, but it's also the reality. Their plans are secret now. They've not told them, and they really show very little inclination to report that to nonprofits in the future. It's a minority who say that they have alerted the nonprofit. Just 36% of planned givers say the nonprofit knows about that gift. Only an additional 5% say, nope, the nonprofit does not know now, but I have some intention to let them know in the future. And 53% say, I prefer they find out when the time comes. And the reason we wanted to really understand what was behind that thinking, what are they worried about? What do they fear in letting a nonprofit know? And the primary answer to that was, it's really none of their business. They really don't need to know. And secondly, some donors worry that maybe they'll change their mind. And if they've committed to a nonprofit by letting them know about a gift, they would feel that kind of creates an ugly situation if they decided to change their mind later on. A few are worried that they're going to be pestered with phone calls or mailings. Some don't want the nonprofit sort of checking up on them like a vulture to see what's going on with them. And something we really learned from our focus groups is that donors are not necessarily looking for special treatment. And while nonprofits may think one way to entice donors to wanting to be a part of us is to offer them perks and benefits, special treatment, there are many donors who are resistant to that. Of course, there are some who like that idea, but there are many who don't like that idea at all. So it makes us think that it doesn't hurt to assure that there will be privacy and to reinforce donors' rights to change their mind. We said, if these things happened, would it make you more inclined to let a donor know? Well, 53%, a majority, said, gosh, if I knew that the nonprofit knew I could change my mind, then that would just make me feel more comfortable about the arrangement. Then everything's on the table. Another 34% say, if I knew they wouldn't share information without my permission, then I might be more willing to arrange no contact. It's along the same line. If they knew it would be helpful to the nonprofit to know and to be able to make a plan for the future, that might make them more inclined. Access to insider information, just as I said, donors are not necessarily looking for that kind of special treatment. And if they had the opportunity to let a nonprofit know, that they had made a gift, but to remain anonymous. So the nonprofit might have an idea of how many planned gifts were out there, but not know who it was. Would a donor feel good about reporting that? Well, I'm sorry to tell you, the answer is not really. So 6% say they would definitely tell. 7% say they would probably do this, might or might not, 21%, and 64% said really there aren't any circumstances they can think of that they would want to let a nonprofit know, even if it were anonymous. They just really feel that's a personal piece of their own information. One of the other things that helps really understand the mood of the donors is understanding that they don't really think about themselves as major givers. There are plenty of people out there who are giving major sums of money, but it isn't a part of their identity to think of themselves as major donors. So you can sort of go down the wrong track with them, again, by courting them as though they are deserving of special perks and benefits and attention. That can often be a turn-off. Just 15% say yes, they consider themselves a major donor to any nonprofit, not just ones that might be in their will, but that would include annual giving as well. 84% say no, they don't really think of themselves as a major donor. And that number doesn't really increase that much in the highest income group. It's just 22% of those with household incomes of $150,000 or more. It's about the same proportion among people who have a planned gift in their will. And that's comparable, really, of the good prospects that we identified in this survey at 20% or 18%. So the mood of the donor universe is really more one of thinking of themselves in more modest terms, regardless of the amount of money that they may be leaving to nonprofits. One of the most useful pieces of information we uncovered is how donors and prospects want to be communicated with. This is based on everybody. 42% say the best way to contact me introducing the idea of a planned gift is through information sent to them in the mail. And that's much higher than a call on the phone, working through a financial advisor, contact by email, in-person meetings. It's higher than really all the rest of those particular modes of communication combined. And it's higher, much higher, among that group of secret givers that we've been talking about. So the best way to reach them is when they can take a look at your materials on their own time, in their own fashion, and learn about what it is that the nonprofit has to offer and how to make that gift. So we suggest from that a two-tiered message strategy. That is, recall, secret givers are in that category who are inclined to make a planned gift who don't yet have a will. And so the message for them primarily is how easy it can be, step one, step two, to create a will and to include a nonprofit in it. For those that are in that motivating or transitioning stage, the easiness needs to be about how to modify a will and include a nonprofit if they haven't done that already. And for both, we think it's important for them, and sort of going along with the easiness factor, to communicate how you can assign a percentage of your estate rather than a fixed amount. That is, it keeps you from having to update a will too often by changing those fixed amounts as circumstances change. And finally, we think it's really important to leverage what we learned about gifts that stick. That is, if you give donors the power to decide how and when you communicate with them, you're sort of creating a relationship with more openness and hopefully more willingness on their part to talk to you about the gifts that they have planned. As you recruit, transition, and motivate, you may be able to help close the deal with planned givers by letting them know that you know they can always change their mind. Again, it creates more of a relationship of trust, and it certainly speaks to the concerns that they voiced to us about whether or not it's a good idea for them to let nonprofits know that they have a planned gift in place. And Larry's going to talk more about how to make those things happen, and I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Ann. Now that you've had a chance to learn more about the world of planned givers and prospects, and our discovery of this younger audience, including the secret givers, that is uniquely open to the idea of making a planned gift, you're probably asking yourself, so what's the next step? Well, we know that you have a very limited marketing budget for which to implement these ideas, and you probably have programs in place based on old strategies: newsletters, postcards, brochures, web content. How can you take advantage of this information to become more successful? Our suggestion is that we rethink your formula for targeting donors. And we have come up with the Stelter Insight formula, which is our suggested approach for reaching your universe of prospects and donors. This is what a typical marketing budget or mailing list should look like. First of all, spend 15% of your budget motivating prospects age 70 and older to make a planned gift. Now keep in mind, this is the hardest nut to crack. According to our research, 95% of the people in America, 70 and older, say they are very settled in their decision not to include a charity in their estate plan versus 79% of the overall population. Obviously, you can't afford to ignore this group, but our research shows why it's so hard to get our age group, of this age group, to respond to your mailings. And in the past, where we've had consultants that have suggested that we only communicate with 70-year-old plus, that gives us a good indication of why there's been criticism of the response rate, low response rate, of some of our marketing efforts in the past. We might not be targeting the right group with the majority of our budget. Secondly, we suggest spending the majority of your budget, 55%, in the sweet spot in which you are transitioning consistent loyal donors into planned givers. This is probably where you likely have the majority of your budget spent already, and we would suggest that you stay the course with that percentage of your marketing plan. What's really new is the idea that you should devote marketing dollars, and we suggest 25%, to recruiting younger donors. The research presentation you just heard validates the benefits of expanding your efforts to this generation and underscores the risks of neglecting this group. I'll give you some more ideas shortly on how you might approach this group more economically. As always, you need to maintain contact with your current plan givers, which represent about 5% of our formula. Focus groups that we conducted last year in advance of our national research reinforce the importance of showing donors three primary things in your communications. One, where does the money go? How good a steward are you of their donations? Secondly, explaining the good that the donations do. In other words, who's benefiting from my gift? And third, make the case for continued support. You've helped us so far, but there's still a need, and please consider that support in the future. So, having decided that we're going to segment our groups by ages, this now presents the next scenario of how do we prepare messages that are specific for these age groups. We want to communicate in a conversational tone, use words that inspire and are in sync with these age groups, and instruct donors to act. So, as part of our research, we learned details about the types of messages that inspire each age group. This can include donor preferences by age, area of the country in which they live, marital status, level of education, and income and wealth. We combined these surveys and other research, such as Pew Research, to arrive at these conclusions. The result is the Stelter Life Stage Library of content. These articles and messaging strategies are created to target the right message to the right generation, including the secret givers. Our clients will have access to this library of content going forward, and their internal team will help tweak our suggested formula to fit with their unique organization's audience. So, the question comes, should we spend budget money, and to what extent, communicating with the secret givers? As our research shows, the secret giver is a group of prospects that have largely been ignored, even though they're viable candidates for making a bequest. It may sound counterintuitive to spend precious marketing dollars on donors who are less educated and have a lower household income than the typical plan giver. Our suggestion is that you first raise the awareness in your organization to the existence of this group that is really willing to be educated and waiting to be asked. Secondly, we consider that you employ a low-cost way to cast this wider net to include this younger audience of donors, including the secret givers. and promote them up the giving pipeline. Luckily, this age group is very comfortable in the use of technology and adapting to it. So, one easy suggestion might be the use of PURLs, personalized URLs. A PURL is sent to a specific donor to a personalized website where they can watch a video, download brochures, perhaps do gift calculations, access other information. And a PURL, such as the one you're looking at, can be printed and mailed for less than 75 cents in many cases. The benefit to the gift planning officer is they really have a built-in instant tracking for this type of information. They will know that the prospect accessed the site and what they did once they were there. What does this do for the gift planning officer? Now they have a big gold star by their name, and the next time they have an opportunity for a conversation with them, they'll know that their interest level is far higher than others that they have communicated with before. Now, having said that, this is a sample of a marketing calendar that you might want to consider, that we're also probably developing into an e-newsletter strategy. And we've broken these groups down, of course, by recruiting, transitioning, and motivating. And going through each one of these subsections, let's look at them. The 40 to 54-year-old age might have content that reads as follows: the most important document you'll ever own, 6 steps to an effective estate plan. Are you getting the most from your money? And then the last communication of the year might be our aggregate research as to what were the most popular articles read that we'll now present to you toward year end. The transitioning age group from 55 to 69, we might start talking about boosting your retirement income. Family comes first, then who benefits from your estate. Life moves fast, keep your will up to date to keep up with the speed. And then finally, the 70-plus group, and you remember that's the age group we were suggesting 15% of your marketing budget be spent on, the ease of making a bequest. Discover the joy of giving without using cash, a gift that gives you security, and then the most recently or most frequently used articles throughout the year that were the highest readership rate. Having developed the new strategy by age and then by messaging, all this will work only if you have enhanced your database in terms of what you know about it. Marketers have long known that there is really and rarely one size that fits all in terms of marketing and message approach. The more you know about your donors in terms of age, educational status, household income, wealth, the more successful you'll be in segmenting your messages to their particular interests and needs. Fortunately, there are tools available, and there are many companies in the country that offer these same tools. I'd just like to go through a couple to make sure you're aware of the things you need to consider when enhancing your database. Age Tracker is simply getting your arms around the age of your database. If you're a non-educational organization, you don't have the luxury of being a traditional organization and being able to track graduation years. Email Tracker. That's the easiest way in some cases to communicate with this secret giver group and certainly that younger recruiting group because they're very plugged into the internet. So finding more email addresses is a great way of adding to your database. Address Tracker. The U.S. Post Office is going to require that starting in November, so you want to keep your database as clean as possible with NCOA, National Change of Address. Wealth Tracker are other ways in which you can accumulate information, publicly traded information about their wealth. Audience Analyzer is another method of tracking age, estimated household income, and again, various models for wealth. Donor Dynamics is a tool that if you have an established plan giving group of prospects, that data can be analyzed from that group, and then we can find other more likely people that look and feel like your plan givers already and establish a priority for enhancing your data. I hope you found this beneficial, and we thank you very much for your attendance today. We're very excited about this groundbreaking research and the kind of aha things that we've developed with this, and we're very excited. We're already working editorially and through our staff, our web team, our graphic designers, our editorial staff. It's a very exciting time at the Stelter Company because we really feel like we've gotten our arms around this mystery of who the plan givers are, why they do things that they do, and of course uncovering the secret givers.